Welcome to Latitude 40, brought to you by the Furno Collective. This podcast celebrates the heart, soul and history of the Furno Group, told by the people who call these islands home. Here we share stories of island life, of resilience and connection, of land and sea, of old ways and new beginnings, from the windswept shores to the heart of our communities. Each episode captures a piece of what makes this island life so unique. So islanders and visitors alike, settle in and join us as we explore the stories that shape the spirit of the Furno Islands, one voice at a time.
Welcome to Latitude 40. I'm your host, Jamie West. Thank you for joining me. My guest today has been part of Flinders Island life for almost 60 years, arriving in 1967 for a short-term postmaster role and never really leaving. Since then, he's been involved in just about every corner of island life: farming, firefighting, local government, bridge building, transport, communications and community leadership, all while raising a family, alongside his wife Pam at Mamana and then later in Lady Baron. Peter Sherriff's story is one of hard work, adaptability and deep commitment to community. And today, we're looking forward to hearing some of the stories, challenges and memories from a life lived fully on Flinders Island. Welcome, Peter. Peter, you were born in 1945, just as the war was ending. What do you know about those early years and your father returning home from service?
Well, as you said, I was born in 45 and Dad didn't get home from the war until 1946, so I was a bit over 12 months up and walking around before the old man seen me. He made up for it later with the size of his boot and a few other things. But yes, obviously I can't remember those early years, but no, it was a totally different world what we live in there.
That's right. And originally you're from the northwest coast?
Yeah, I was born at a place called Rowland, just out of Sheffield, and Pam, my wife, she was born in East Devonport. Yeah, it's a country life right up there, and we had our own ferrets and rabbit, kangaroo shooting, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Just a normal kid, yeah.
And of course, you met Pam on the northwest coast.
Yeah.
You know, tell us the story about meeting Pam. I believe there was a little bit of matchmaking involved.
A fair bit of matchmaking, I think, because I didn't have nothing to do with it. I was just told by my brother that we were going up to church to do it, Rowland, and they were bringing him and his girlfriend at the time, now his wife, bringing this other girl along too. So that's the first time I've seen Pam, and I've seen a fair bit of her since then, yeah.
yeah, for quite some time.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely thing too. So what led you then into telecommunications in the Postmaster General Department?
Well, I finished school in 59 or 60, and at that stage, that was the first time in the Australian economy there'd been a bit of a downturn since World War II. All the rebuilding and went on. And I wanted to be a carpenter, and Dad was working on the railway, and he said, no, he says, you're going to get a government job, they can't sack you. If things go bad, you won't get sacked. So then I tried to go into the PMG, it was called in those days, Postmaster General's Department, which is subsequently split up into Australia Post and Telecom. Anyway, I tried to get in the technical side of it and found out I was colourblind, so that stuffed that up. So then went into the postal side and went through that, working down the northwest coast there for 6 or 7 years. I was asked if I wanted to go to Flinders Island for 3 months, relieving over there until they filled the position. So we said yes to do that.
So it was in 1967 you came to Flinders Island for what was meant to be a short posting.
That's right.
So what were your first impressions of Flinders Island, and did you ever imagine that 3 months would become nearly 60 years?
No. It was 3 months, and then I'd applied for the job, and I was appointed to the job, which is, in those days was a 3-year term. There were remote areas around Australia. PMG was obliged to relocate after 3 years if you wanted to.
And your first impressions?
Well, it's totally different from Georgetown, where we came from. The only sealed road on the island was from the airport into Whitemark. The Lagoon Road was sealed. Patrick Street was sealed down to the Municipal Hall. The town power was supplied by the hospital. There used to be a power station, but that got burnt down a bit beforehand. The PMG had its own generators to keep exchanges going and the post office and those sort of things. Whitemark is probably about half the size it is now. Apart from David Henning's house, there's nothing on the eastern side of James Street. There's no housing commission houses down past Martin Street. All that wasn't there. On the Esplanade, there's only the old bakery where Donga lives now. That was the bakery. And there's Bull Wilson down on the corner where Colin Wilson lives now. Whitemark was just very little place.
I was just about to say, it's fair to change that, in some ways a lot's changed, but in others kind of not a lot in terms of its layout. But
No.
Certainly we've moved on from, predominantly gravel roads.
Oh, yeah. And also then the only milk you get, you had to go out to Jeff Walker's dairy to get your milk. That's where the Kunja distillery is now. Take your billy out there and your 50 cents and get your billy full of milk and your cream if you wanted some. Walker's supermarket was still up where Dog Nichols is on Mamana Road. They'd moved their garage into Whitemark and the supermarket part was still being built. The butter factory was still going down the butter factory road.
So dairy was still very much still prominent on the island at the time you arrived.
Yeah, that's 12 or 14 dairy farmers still operating there. That closed down in the early 70s, mid-70s because of health department regulations just precluded it from being upgraded to the new standard and all those sort of things.
Well, that's my understanding, is that there was a lot of timber in terms of the mechanisms supporting dairy, timber built into the machinery, but there was this requirement to go stainless steel.
To go stainless steel, that's right,
yeah. Just going back to your years of being postmaster, tell us a bit more about that role. It involved much more than just sorting mail.
Yeah, that's right. The PMG was probably the biggest employer in Whitemark at the time, bigger than the hospital, I think. Outside there was 5 linesmen, because in those days everything was overhead on copper wires. There's no cables around the island. There was 4 technicians to maintain the exchanges around the place. There was the Whitemark Exchange, Ranga, Lady Baron, Lacrana, Mamana, Imeta. So they were kept fairly busy, and now Tanner, of course, and Walker's Hill. All those things had to be maintained. There's manual exchange in Whitemark, about 5 or 6 telephons working there. As the postmaster, I was working during the day. Every second week, used to have to sleep in the exchange and do the night shift on the exchange.
And why the night shift?
It was a 24-hour service. They had a supply. Had a little camp stretcher used to sleep in there, and there'd be an alarm on. So when everyone rang up, the shutter would go and the alarm would go off and you'd wake up and answer the call. And another thing that was peculiar to the Ware area was we had a thing called the outpost radio. That gave access to the outer islands. They could call in by radio into us at the exchange, and we could pass messages on, like Rue and Chesty below might be on Porramshiel Island doing cattle work and they wanted to get hold of Athol and Brynworth, and they could call us up and we'd pass a message on to Athol and we vice versa. There was to there and also to Harry Lovett at Ned's Point, Waterhouse Island, Long Island, and a couple of other islands when the mutton birds were in season. Yeah.
Was there any one particular phone call that you took? I'm trying to actually understand the exchange. You've got the message, and I think that there was one occasion where was it something to do with trying to get some message through to the hospital that occurred?
It was my first night on the night shift. It was the first call I answered. The shutter come down, number 129, I remember it was. And this bloke said, put us through to the hospital, please. I said, what's the number? He said, I don't know. He said, you're the exchange. You should know the number. Anyway, he said, I'm trying to find out what that woman of mine's doing. She's been in there all afternoon. She hasn't done anything. She's supposed to be having a baby. Anyway, it turned out later it was Jimmy Grace and Betty was in there having Darren. So.
Darren, otherwise known as Bill to most people.
Bill Grace.
Yeah, right.
And that must have been 2 nights before Christmas. He was born Christmas Eve, I think.
What do you think younger generations don't realise about communications on the island in those days?
Well, it's certainly different to what it is now. Everyone's got a mobile phone. In those days, it was either just the hand crank phone or the exchange. If you're on an automatic exchange, then the two-way radios come in. That was a great boon, particularly for fishermen and that sort of stuff.
There's no doubt you've certainly seen a rather transformative time of telephone exchange through to the advent of mobile phones, where a lot of people don't even have landlines these days.
Well, that's right, yeah.
Peter, what has family life on Flinders Island meant to you?
Well, it's been a terrific place to bring up a young family, there's no doubt about that. It was a caring community. Look, everyone looked after each other. Kids would be swapped around over the place. We might have the Campbell kids or the Grace kids at our place for a while, and kids would be hooning around under little trikes and all that sort of stuff, and vice versa. It was a safe place. Our children, well, go back a little bit. After the 3 months we were here, then we got on to 3 years, and we said, we'll stay here until the kids start school, and then we'll go. And they started school, and we were still here, and they said, we'll stay until they start high school. We're still here.
Yeah, your daughter Marie, she says that there's a lovely sense that although you had no blood relatives here, island families adopted you, and you've just talked about that sense of community that was being established.
That's true.
That sense of being made feel welcome.
Yeah, we're all welcome. Yeah, and then we used to go out to various farmers and do a bit of work for them at the weekend, and that sort of go roost shooting with their boys and that sort of stuff, and fishing and everything else. It was good.
Well, your children certainly concur with your account of events. They state that and describe a very warm and stable upbringing, memories of sheep yards, fishing trips, camping, horses, tractors, mini bikes. So obviously they had a full suite of things to occupy their time meaningfully.
Yeah, but most of that stuff we had was second hand. Yeah, it was hand-me-down. That's another thing was a great thing over here. When we had young kids and other soldier settlers, because all had young families in those days, there'd be a lot of clothing swapped. As one family grew out of those clothes, they'd go to the next family and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure that happens so much anymore. I know that the tip shop these days plays a bit of a role in kind of redistributing clothes. I think that we're becoming increasingly conscious of trying to repurpose things like furniture and clothing in particular.
Right. Yeah.
It's a good thing to see that we're now focused on that and reducing our waste footprint here on the island. Peter, going into the 1970s, you took a leap into farming at Bendemeer. What factors were at play that made you decide to go into farming?
Well, I'd always had a hankering to do something. I was getting sick of being inside all the time. And while I was still in the post office, I used to work for John Bowman of a weekend, slashing paddocks and doing a bit of fencing and that. And for $2 an hour, it was at the time. That was good money in those days. And then in 1973, I think it was, there was a accident on the island, and I had a young bloke named Fred Midson working with me. He was a bit of a story to Fred too. He'd been in the post office at Westbury and he got into strife over there got in with the wrong mob. And the bosses-in-law, and he rang up and said, "Got a bloke over here. He's not a bad little boy, but he just got the wrong mob. Would you mind taking him over there and see what happened to him?" So Fred came over to us, and he ended up marrying a local girl, Lynette Mould, and her brother Wayne, Billy Martin was his nickname. Wayne was the butcher, apprenticed to Tom Wing at the butcher's. And the Sunday before Christmas, Wayne was either engaged or very about to be engaged to one of Primo and Lisa Bergman's daughters. So Fred and Wayne went out there to kill the beast on the Sunday and done the beast, and they were coming back into Whitemark, and they had an accident at Ray Andrews' corner, and they both got killed, and this would stuff that Christmas up completely. That's what got me to thinking that no use going in life thinking about doing something. Get in and bloody well do it. So I think that's what really pushed me to go a bit further. And
life's not a dress rehearsal for the real thing. This is it. So sometimes you've just got to...
No use going through life wishing get in and do it.
That's right. However, farming wasn't easy by any stretch of the imagination. There was a period there where it was very high interest rates and changing wool markets. They must have been incredibly difficult to, work through. How tough were those years?
They were tough. When we first bought the farm, the cattle prices was on the way down. One of the neighbours down the road sold out and I bought 110 cattle, cows and small calves and the bull, bought them all for $332, which is unbelievable these days, but that was the market rate at those days. Then in the 1980s, inflation took off and interest took off. We got paying 22% interest rates in the mid to late 80s, and that was...
That's unimaginable.
It is now, but that's what it was. You got to sell a bit of land to keep the rest of it afloat. 1990s, I think it was, they disbanded the floor price on the wool. You were guaranteed to get something for your wool. If you weren't in sheep, the banks weren't interested in you because they knew they were going to get something because there was a price there. Anyway, they disbanded the wool price scheme. That meant sheep were virtually worthless. We were paid to shoot sheep. They didn't cover their cost to go off the island. Joe Mills, he lived opposite where Steve and Marie are there at the Crana, and he dug a big hole with his bulldozer and he put 20-odd thousand sheep in this one hole. And one day, because sheep expand with gases and the hole exploded. And
I really find it difficult to wrap my head around how heartbreaking that must have been for so many of our farmers on the island at that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't do your psyche much good when you've got to stand there and shoot, get over a pen and shoot, bang, 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 and shooting all the sheep.
Yeah, and I know that while that's going on, you're still trying to find ways in which to,
keep meat on the table.
Yeah, be afloat. Yeah. And so during that time, you seem to be able to find other things to do alongside farming. You had multiple jobs running at once, stock carting, building, farming, doing what you simply had to do to survive. Can you just explore a little bit more about those other things that you were doing alongside farming?
Well, when we first bought the farm, there were a truck and a cart licence from Teddy to Law. And for 6 or 7 years, I had a cartage business. It was carted everything from livestock, wool, hay, a bit of gravel, all that sort of thing. It's all square bales, the hay in those days. And the best year we had was 75,300 square bales we carted in the one season, which kept us fairly busy. And at one stage there, I'd probably get home 9 o'clock at night and I said to Pam, tomorrow night, can you keep the kids up? So I can say, why is that? So I haven't seen them for 10 days because I was home after they went to bed and up and gone before they got out of bed. So, yeah, those sort of things. And then I sold the cartage business to young Bruno Perry in about 1980, I think it was. And then I started doing a bit of shed repairing, and then Steve come on the scene.
That's Steve Crawford.
Steve Crawford, yes. He was rouseabouting in those days, and he hadn't started shearing, and apparently married boys and something. I can get your job out of Sherriff if you want to. He's got 3 daughters out there. So he came and he snaffled one daughter. After that, he's a qualified builder, and we started building shearing sheds together and that sort of stuff. Yeah, and then the house we were in on the farm, it was a real boggy place. Gosh, it was wet. During the winter time, the water would flow through the fence on one side of the foundations and out the other, and really wet days you have to piggy bank the kids from the back door over to the road so they could go up the road to the bus stop. We got that wet. The foundations were rotting and the septic tank had rotted. We decided to move the house across the farm. So Kevin and Roy Peddle came and gave me a hand, and we jacked the house up, put a couple of condemned hydro poles underneath it, hooked a bulldozer at the one end and the bulldozer at the back, and pushed it across the paddock to a dry place on the farm. 2/3 of the way across that day, we got bogged near the cattle yards, a bit of an angle, and We didn't take any furniture, nothing out of it, just take the...
So let me just get this right. You never contemplated building another house. You just simply looked at this house and said, this is just too wet where this is. We're just going to move it. Yeah. So how far did you move it?
Oh, it'd be 400 or 500 yards, I suppose. And across the paddock where the hydro poles were, like a big sledge, the ground was that hot you couldn't put your hand on it, that much friction on it. Anyway, you got up near the cartage house and got bogged trying to turn the corner, and we couldn't get in the doors to get to bed, so we had to open the window up and climb in through the window to go to bed for the night.
Most people, when you think about moving house, it's like you leave one house and you go to another, but in this case you actually moved the house.
Yeah, we were like a crab. We took a house with us.
And my understanding is, Peter, is that because of that experience, you were able to inform other house relocations on Flinders Island.
Yeah, we've done a couple of others, yeah.
Yeah, so your sons?
Yeah, mix we done here. We moved that, well, that'd be 10 or 12 k's. That was a bit different. We had the mobile crane in there. We were modern those days.
Over the time that I've been here, I've heard of other stories of people having their houses moved. I know that Alison and John Hizzard have a soldier settlement house that was relocated there.
That's right.
You can probably think of others I don't know about.
Oh, yeah, and also, well, probably the first house to move that I can recall of was the district medical officer in Whitemark. That was where that little garden is on the corner near the multi-purpose centre. A bloke by the name of Bert Bye bought that, and he moved it out to Lacrana Road where the house where Lorna Rochford lives in there.
Yeah, I'm familiar with those buildings and where Lorna lives, and I'm familiar with the story. They're lovely little cottages, and to think that all those years ago they could be relocated from Whitemark all the way down to Lacrana is quite amazing.
Yeah, those sort of things. And then, it worked out all right. And then after that, Dale Wells and I was out there building something for him, and one of us mentioned concrete and thought we might make some concrete posts. Because Makana Park and Jeff Albers and Alan Norfolk had just done a lot of fencing up on Makana Park, and they'd used these precast fence posts that brought in from the mainland. We thought, we'd probably make them here.
And that was the beginning of WASP and bridge building.
Yeah, the Wells and Sherriff precast we started off with, yeah.
And so how did you go from concrete fence posts and troughs into bridge construction? Tell us about that.
It was after I'd been warden of the council. The council engineer, Bill Lawson from Hobart, there's bridges here on the island due for replacement. He said, well, why not go into concrete bridges? You've got a bigger lifespan and that sort of stuff. And also, at that stage, a lot of Tasmanians getting locked up in forest reserves and all that sort of stuff, and there wasn't access to the good bridge timbers they used to get previously. So, and the consensus of the island at the time was that you couldn't make good concrete on Flinders Island because there's no aggregate, no 3/4 inch aggregate to go in it. Therefore, you couldn't get the strength into it. We all questioned that, so he took some samples of our local sand down to the hydro testing laboratories. And in those days, if you wanted to know anything about concrete in Tasmania, you asked the hydro because they'd build dams everywhere. Anyway, they done tests on it, and it came back that with a bit more cement in it than normal, the concrete here could be just as strong as anything made in Tasmania. So that was the start of it, and then the council advertised for expression of interest to run to do something. So Wellesley and I put in for it. We were the only ones who put in for it, I think. So we had to start from scratch in Whitemark. We had to put down our own casting bed and stressing blocks and all everything else. We made gantry cranes out of the old airport luggage terminal at the airport. And we started off from there and ended up doing 32 bridges on the island. We made one and sent it down to Bothwell, still going down there. And we made I reckon we've made over 1,000 water troughs around the island. And
that's an amazing contribution.
Well, no one knew it was going to work, but it did.
You had a go?
We had a go.
You did some learning?
Yeah.
Did some
We
research?
learned on the way. We did some learning, yeah.
Yeah, and then...
We had no failures, though.
That's amazing. The bridges are still standing.
Still standing, yeah.
You mentioned beforehand that you joined the Flinders Council in the mid-1980s and at some stage you became warden. What motivated you to step into local government?
Well, it was a bit like a courtship. I was pushed into it. Alec Foster was in those days there was 3 wards on the island, north, south and central. And Alec Foster had just sold his farm and he was in the council. And he rang up and said to me, "You're going to take over from me in the council." And I said, "What?" "Norm McQueen's going to come down and give you the nomination form to sign. You signed it." And I didn't disagree with it. Anyway, short of it was I got elected to council in 1986, I think it was.
It didn't sound like you needed to do much of a campaign.
Probably not. There was Margaret Wheatley and I don't know who the other candidate was, but anyway, I got in on preferences and then about 12 or 18 months later they made me deputy warden, and then in 1989 Peter Blunston resigned as warden and I took over and kept on doing that for 4 years.
During your time there, you were heavily involved in negotiating airport funding. Can you explain what was at stake for the island?
Prior to that, well, before about the Second World War, I think, Department of Civil Aviation, the DCA, ran the airport. It was all federally funded, of course, and then the government in the 1990s, they decided they're going to divest themselves of any responsibility for regional airports in Australia. All they want to do is the big fellas. So they got rid of all the mainland ones like Mount Gambier, Hamilton, Mildura. And the only 2 left by the time they come down to us there's only King and Flinders Island left. These 2 bureaucrats come down, they chartered a plane from Melbourne. They'd arranged for us to have a meeting in the afternoon. Come in and said, "Offer you the package to take over the local airport and we are getting out of this sort of thing. And as a gesture of our goodwill, we'll offer you $330,000, I think it was, for a new terminal building." She said, "It's pretty old now and we'll give you money to put up a new terminal building." He said, "Me and Bernard will go out of the room, you can discuss it and we'll come back." We came back in and we decided, no, we weren't going to accept it.
Not enough money.
Not enough money. And he came back and said, "Well, we're ready to go, gentlemen." And I said, "No, we're not going to accept your offer." And everyone else says, and said, "No, but we are not. You're putting a tax on our isolation." And everywhere else in Australia, you've got the federally funded government highways, you've got the railways, we've got nothing like that. This is our only way we can get. Oh, that's disappointing. Anyway, I said, "We've got to go now." King Island at 4:30, so they took off. After that, Charles Day was the council clerk, was called in those days, now you call him the general manager. We started negotiating with Canberra and we got this and we got that. And it got to the stage where we just couldn't go anywhere. So Senator Michael Taylor organised it. Senator Bob Collins, he was the Federal Minister for Transport. He came down to Hobart and Shirley Holloway was the deputy and we went down and seen him. And he was from the Northern Territory. He was not a bad bloke. We put our case to him when the King and Flinders Island are the only 2 islands around Australian mainland who rely solely on air transport. He said, "No, you're not. I'll tell you the islands, Bathurst Island, they only got airport." And I said, "No, they haven't. They can go by the barge. We can't." "Oh, yeah, you're right." Anyway, he came back with an extra $700,000 to put into the kitty to make it a bit worthwhile. Then we got the airport lighting out of him, the hazard lighting on top of the hills and a few other things. The total package ended up with about $1.3 million.
So $1 million extra through your advocacy and standing firm on what this island needed versus what was being offered. That's what you helped achieve.
Yeah, I guess that was it, yeah.
You know, your advocacy for Flinders Island didn't stop there. You've also advocated strongly around our shipping services. So why were those issues so critical for Flinders Island and how did that come about?
Well, the Flinders Island Shipping Company operated out of Whitemark, 2, sometimes 3 vessels. The Flinders Trader, the Lady Julian and the Katika. They were all old. They were getting past their serviceable life. And the government had various Liberal and Labor governments that said, "Oh, we're going to arrest the Flinders Island shipping service, we're going to give you good service." Nothing ever got done. So Ray Groom was Premier at the time, so wrote to him and said it's time to do something. We can't put up with this. We're being held back by our shipping service. That didn't go down too well. I even had a bureaucrat ring up and they wanted me to withdraw the letter because we can't deal with it at this stage. That letter's staying.
I was going to say, but again, you held firm.
Yeah. Anyway, the government called for expression to interest Initially there was 3. There was Burns Philp from Queensland. They come down, had a look and went back and done nothing. Tank Bale from Bridport and the local shipping company. Those 2 put in expressions of interest to the government, and the government, in its wisdom, decided on Mr. Bales from Bridport. He was operated out of Bridport into Lady Barron. He wouldn't go to Whitemark because it was tidal port, even though he came out of a tidal port. Anyway, the government went with him and they put in a roll-on office facility at Lady Barron, and it went from there. It wasn't plain sailing.
You gave them a bit of advice, didn't you, really, around how to organise their operation to a degree?
Well, I did a bit because Tank did build boats and that sort of stuff. We did never run a shipping system, particularly not with livestock. He originally was going to do it all in trailers on the boat, which to our way of thinking over here was wrong, because you'd bring the general cargo over on a normal trip, then you'd have to go back to Bridport, get the trailers, come over, load up, and by that time it could be blowing 60 knots and the boat wouldn't go. And also they're very difficult to keep an eye on the cattle when you're on top deck sort of thing, and no one can get to them.
So what advice did you give him?
I told him to put in the pens like the old boats, pens they can put up on the boat. Cattle could walk on. They looked at every couple of hours. Stockmen go through and make sure they're all in good condition and all that sort of stuff.
So just to clarify, the advice given was introduce collapsible stock pens so that they could be pushed out of the way when general freight was coming to Flinders Island, and then introduce so that cattle could go onto the boat for the return leg. So there was no wasted
time and all that sort of time. Yeah, and it worked well, and got that way. Tank had nicknamed me Peter the Poison Pen, because all the letters I've been writing down to Hobart and that sort of stuff. He was a funny bloke to deal with. You'd ring him up sometime and he'd say, "I'll talk to someone." It really cares, and just throw the phone down. We respected each other in the finish anyway. It worked okay. Yeah.
So just at this time in your life, and just to make it clear about what you had going on, you were farming, you were the warden, you were running a concreting business, and obviously you were involved in as a family person as well as and if that's not enough, you actually also during this time of busyness became the Mana Fire Brigade chief. I mean, albeit back in 1979. Tell us a little bit about how your involvement in the Fire Brigade started.
Well, there's another. I was pushed into that too in 1979.
Did you not know how to say no?
Probably not. Probably not a fair answer.
Fair, but look, yes, okay, so...
God rang up Ian Beadle. He was the Fire Brigade captain. He sold his farm. His nickname was God, not to his face, but everyone else knew him as God. He rang up and said, "Can you come to the Fire Brigade meeting? We want you to be the next Fire Brigade captain. You're the youngest farmer in the area. All the rest of us are getting too old." So it just happened. Took it on.
And you didn't have much equipment, is my understanding.
Oh, God, no. No, we had nothing really. Our tanker was a cut-down truck chassis with a 250-gallon or 1,000-litre tank on the back of it, and no brakes or nothing like that on it. Just a Briggs and Stratton motor there went sometimes, a rake hoe, a shovel, and one knapsack. And that was about it. If you had to go to a fire, it was dangerous. Hook the trailer up to a Land Rover or Hilux, because that much weight. It's about 6 tonne in this trailer altogether.
Oh, goodness me, that is dangerous.
It is. So it either had to be a tractor or you just went very slow. We didn't get our first 4-wheel vehicle till, God, mid-90s, I suppose it would have been.
Right, and rolling forward a little bit from the mid-90s, and there was a huge fire here in 2003.
Yeah, that's right.
Can you tell me a bit about your role coordinating communications during that time?
Yeah, well, as you pointed out, it started from a lightning strike and then it went berserk. I'd done a shift up on Hawlands Gap Road and got home about 2 o'clock in the morning, and 7 o'clock in the morning the phone rang and Jimmy Grace said, "Get into Whitemark, they need you in there, otherwise we're going to have a revolt. They don't know what they're doing." Anyway, I went in there and they put me on the radio. I was in there for nearly a week, I suppose it was, and I didn't get home. Yeah, it was pretty full-on time. And Jimmy Grace was the group captain, and he done a fantastic job until he burnt himself out. He ended up spending a few days in hospital.
Oh, goodness.
And then I had to take over from him outside. And, it was pretty full-on, but I think that really showed the community spirit.
Yeah, it no doubt did. You know, my understanding of your role was somewhat of interpretation between visiting firefighting specialists and our local firefighters.
Yeah.
And it highlighted probably the need for further training as a result of, and I'm talking training in terms of being able to convey to people that don't live here exactly where you are on the island so you can call in the resources. And I remember you talking about the warbird being called in. Can you talk to us a little bit about...
The Firebird, yeah.
Oh, Firebird, was it? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they had this big helicopter, and he was called Firebird one. That was his call sign on the radio. And anyway, the fire was coming down towards the airport, Bunker Dargaville's place. And Jimmy Grace rang up called up on the phone and said, "Get that Firebird in there, get him up to Bunker's place." And I said, "I'll have to get the coordinates for him." He said, "Oh, don't bugger about the coordinates. Just tell him to come to Bunker's place." And I said, "Well, Jimmy," this pilot comes from Canova in Western Australia, and he doesn't know where Bunker lives, but he can read a map." But the converse of that, of course, that's why I went in there, because these mob that sent over from the mainland, it was called an Instant Management Team. It's one of the first they'd ever tried it in Tasmania. They had people from forestry and parks, state fire and emergency to lead the firefighting effort. They all worked on grid references, and our boys no idea what map references were. And also they sent these blokes over sort of team leaders. One bloke could go with Lacrana, right, one with Mamara, and feeding them. Some of them, they put our boys at risk, lives at risk.
Yeah.
And it didn't get to revolt, but by gosh, things weren't very happy for a while.
Your story reminds me, or makes me reflect on my own training as a volunteer firefighting, and of course understand a grid reference and being able to communicate where you are or where a fire might be.
And what you need and when you need it,
is really important.
Yeah.
And I think my understanding is that as a result of your role in enabling effective communication during that fire in 2003, you were nominated for an Australian of the Year award.
Yeah, that was totally out of the blue. Still haven't got a clue who nominated me, but apparently each state has a board you can nominate. There's no restriction on how many people can be nominated from each state, but then these state committees have got to narrow it down, and they submit probably a dozen names from each state to go into Australian of the Year, and I'd been selected as one of the 12 or whatever it was to go for Tasmania. And I didn't get Australian of the Year. Steve Waugh got it that year. Yeah, I suppose it's a nice day, yeah.
Peter, on a slightly lighter note, I've got a few questions I want to ask you. And in preparation for this interview, I did say I'd try to dig up a bit of dirt on you.
You did, yeah.
It's important that our listeners have a laugh, as well as our fellow community members.
Yeah.
So is it true your little finger being chopped off by a fence post driver was the best thing that ever happened to it?
Yeah.
Can you explain why?
Well, it had arthritis and you used to stick out and get caught on everything. So after the post driver had finished with it, it evened things up a bit.
The finger that you didn't need.
The finger that didn't need, yeah.
Goodness me. And also, tell me, what's the story behind the crop of Irish chewing tobacco
good God,
you purportedly tried to grow in the front paddock?
Yeah. I used to quite regularly put a crop probably of rape or turnips or something like that in it. Anyway, the road paddock, I'd ploughed that up and got a crop going. And we had a working bee up at the emitter hall, putting the boozer on the side of it. Billy Cook was there, and Kevin Haynes and Joe Pincini, a few others, and one of them asked me, "What do you put in the front paddock?" And I said, "Oh, it's the university rang me up and wanted to know if I'd put in an experimental crop for them." And they said, "Oh, what is it?" And I said, "It was Irenaeus brassicatus." "Oh, what the hell is that?" And commonly known as Irish chewing tobacco. "Oh, good. What do you do with that?" I said, "Well, the best source of omega-3 acid in a vegetable plant. Oh, good. Oh, yeah, that'd be interesting. Steve come home, Steve McCrawford, him and Ray still engaged in this day. He came up for tea one night and he came in and said, what have you got going in the front paddock? And I said, oh, it's Irish chewing tobacco. And Pam here, she come round, give me the real teapot, hand on one hip, finger at the other. How come I'm the last person to know around this front to know what's going on here? So that was the story of the Irish chewing tobacco. Yeah. Mm.
Peter, I want to go back to your time in concreting just for a moment, because as a result of your experience in concreting, there was a moment whereby an opportunity presented itself to both you and your wife, Pam, to take what you had experienced and learned to the Northern Territory. Can you tell our listeners how that came about?
Well, it came about through Bill Lawson, who was the council engineer. He was also involved deeply with a thing called the Beacon Foundation, which the reason for operation was to try and help young people get into occupations and employment for the opportunities. And he was involved somehow with an Aboriginal association in Kununurra, which is up on the Ord River scheme, northern Western Australia. Anyway, we're just going to start work on the wharf at Lady Barron, put a new wharf in down there, and got this phone call, Bill Lawson, how you going? Interested in doing the job for 6 weeks to start with. I said, where? He says, Kununurra. Do you know where that is? I said, yeah, right. I want you to go up there, and I've got an Aboriginal employment program. I want you to go up there and start a program to build concrete houses for the Aboriginals. So I can't do it at the moment, I'm carving. He said, when do you finish carving? I said, middle of September. Oh, yeah, all right. Middle of September, you're ring up. Did you finish carving yet? And I said, yes. I booked your plane. You can go. Bring Pram too. You're going up there for 6 weeks.
Yeah, just another job that you were told what to do and pushed into it. But it sounded to me
I think why he picked me. We started here from nothing and we'd just done it. And he said, if you've done it there, you can do it up there. It was not quite the case. We went up there for 6 weeks the first time. Then next year, we set up in the dry season. And then the next dry season, we went up for 5 months, I think it was. Then the following year for 12 months to build these concrete houses. We had to build our own casting bed and all those sort of things and formwork. They hadn't got their plans for the housing deals finalised, so that we made them make a bridge and a causeway across between Kununurra and the lakeside suburb. It was an interesting job. The last time we were up there, we had to replace all the cattle gates with grids on the old Darwin Road between Wyndham and Kununurra.
It's such an amazing story too, to have pretty much been self-taught in all things concrete and then get an invitation to go and teach people at the other end of the country to do it. And clearly you must have had time as an employer teaching people here on Flinders Island concrete and it eventually led, obviously, to the transition of the business to your son, Michael. Are there any employees in particular or stories about employing local people that you wish to share?
Yeah, well, the crew will know what I'm talking about. Bunker. The Dargavilles. James Dargaville, I employed him. He was a part of my hay carting gang in the 70s. And then his son, Nugget, Daniel, he'd left school and he'd had trouble keeping employment, we'll say that.
What did he do?
Well, he had done a bit of crayfishing and all that sort of stuff, and sometimes he'd turn up and sometimes he wouldn't, apparently. He put the new Harley's Bridge in, well, it got burnt down during the fire, and Nugget, could I give him a job? And I said, yeah. Anyway, he started with me, and he'd work like a Trojan, and by gosh, he was a good worker when he was there. Trouble was, him and Crystal McQueen and young Coley, they were all mad surfers. Friday afternoon, turn up and Nugget say, what are we doing Monday, Pete? Oh, it's not a real... well, surf's going to be real good at the Pot Bowl of the weekend. Queenie and Coley and I were going to go out there surf and might have to stay Monday as well. I said, oh, all right, as long as you're back. That would be right. That'd work sometimes. The next time he mightn't come back for a fortnight. Then he'd turn up to work and start working again. Anyway, this time he hadn't worked for about nearly 10 days or so, and I was walking past the pub and he came out of the pub and said, oh, g'day, Peter, I'll be back at work on Monday, and said, I don't need you anymore. Oh, I don't know, Mick's home, I don't need you anymore. Oh, anyway, that's where he ended that stage. Then he met Gina and they got married, and he grew up both ways in family values and everything else. And he came back to the island and asked for a job again, and I said, yeah, but won't be nothing like it was before. He started working 9 to 5, 5 to 8 to 5, whatever it was, 5 days a week probably. And then one day they were working, stinging hot it was, head down doing something on the bench. He looked at me and said, you know, I must have been a proper bastard to employ when I was here before. And I said, yeah, you were.
It must be satisfying to see both Mick and Nugget take on that side of the business and still be, and continuing on with it, offering an absolute essential and vital service to the island through, whether it be footpaths, driveways, you know, building construction. I mean, I probably haven't done it justice in terms of just describing those elements of the operation.
Yeah, I think you summed up there pretty well. It does give me pride to know that they're doing a pretty good job. But you're talking there about the Irish chewing tobacco. I'll get back at Mick on this one. When he was going to school in about grade 2 or 3, he came home one night and he asked, what's a hearth? And Pam said, oh, the thing in front of the fire. She says, no, I mean a hearth. And she took him into the lounge room and looked, there's the hearth in front of it, stops the sparks coming out and getting on the floor and burning the floorboards. No, it can't be right. She said, why not? She said, well, I was at school today and Robert Fern said to me, if I didn't stop fighting, he's going to kick me up the hearth.
As we've heard today, Peter Sherriff's story is really the story of a generation of island people who simply did whatever needed doing. Over nearly 6 decades on Flinders Island, Peter has moved between occupations, industries and community roles with a quiet determination that reflects the resilience of island life itself. From communications and farming to transport, firefighting, local government, construction and community leadership. Like so many people living in remote communities, employment here was never just one job title. It was adaptability. It was long hours. It was stepping in when something needed fixing, building or protecting. And through it all, Peter's contribution has helped shape both the infrastructure and the spirit of this island community. And perhaps what stands out most is not only what Peter achieved professionally, but the way he and Pam raised a family, built relationships and became woven into life on Flinders Island. Peter, thank you for sharing your memories, your stories and your reflections with us today. It's been an absolute privilege to hear about a lifetime of contribution to island life. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
We acknowledge the ancient history of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the first people of Lutruwita, Tasmania. This episode is recorded on the lands and waters of the Furneaux Islands. We recognise the continuing spiritual and ancestral connections of Tasmanian Aboriginal people to these islands, and we honour the strength, resilience and living culture of Aboriginal people today.